Hi and welcome. This is Sandeep Unnithan from India Today magazine, and I'm honored to be speaking to Captain Sequeira from the bridge of the INS Kochi. Welcome, sir.
Hi, Sandeep, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. And the events of Cyclone Tauktae have been over a week old now, but the memories of that incredible rescue that you pulled off are still fresh in our minds. Indeed, the hundreds of people that you rescued that day. Could you recount to us the events of the 17th of May? How did this whole thing begin?
Sure. So, like you're aware, and I'm sure you was aware, 17th was the day that we had the cyclone passing west of Mumbai. Uh, West Naval Command here in Mumbai was monitoring the cyclone very carefully, and we were making our own preparations to keep our ship safe. That's what we normally do when you have rough weather. And 17 started with our ships being protecting themselves against passing the cyclone and intense winds and rains that were lashing Mumbai harbor at that point. Somewhere around 7:30 or 8, we had some initial inputs that we may have to sail. The situation was getting worse, and the command was foreseeing possible situations or incidents where the Navy might be called into help. We had done that. We acted on their orders, and in another hour or two, we were told that we were being considered for a deployment. We finally got our orders at about 10:30. I imagine that's when the Navy must have got some request from the civil authorities, and by 11:30, I had casted off from Mumbai. Uh, I was being the ready ship and the outermost was the first to move out. Um, of course, there were very challenging conditions for us then to manage the cast off and leave harbor. Uh, Winds were about 70, 80 kilometers an hour, intense rain, almost blinding. You couldn't stand outside. I couldn't stand where I'm standing now, but we had to do it.
You're standing on the
Because
bridge right now. You're standing on the
I'm
bridge.
standing on the bridge wing,
Right.
yes, and we cast off from the bridge top. Uh, I remember standing with my navigator taking shelter behind the radar to see ahead because the intensity of the rain on our face was that bad. We just keep our eyes open. But it was interesting to say the least. Uh, the tugs came in, they gave us that little support. The engine responded beautifully, and we managed to pull out of harbor. Navigating out of course, was a challenge considering there was no visibility. So essentially, what we did was blind piloted using radars to keep track of what is around us, and those sort of navigates. It is a little tricky because radars can also miss small objects in intense weather. So we doubled our lookouts. Whatever window we could see through, we were out at it, and we left harbor under those circumstances.
This would be Sea
As we
State 7 or Sea State 8. What would you call it at that time?
uh, Inside harbor, it was still not that bad. It would have it Of course the ship was getting pitched around a bit, but as we left harbor and as soon as you leave, it's about 10, 12 miles out. As soon as you come out into open waters, well, that's when it really hit. So we were then already in sea state 7 to 8. Winds had picked up. They had gone up further to 15 knots. It's about 100 kilometers an hour, uh, mainly from the south. And swell was pretty high, almost 9 to 10 meters. So I had waves breaking over my forecastle and some of them swamping my bridge as well. So we were getting washed with water. We had of course prepared as we were moving out for this weather. We were heading to a cyclone at the end of the day. So we had to batten down, keep everybody off the deck, get them inside. The ship did get subjected to quite a bit of motion, violent motion. And as we headed out, there was a fair amount of tossing and turning, as one would expect in such sea conditions. Uh,
Captain Sequeira, could you tell our viewers, for someone who's not acquainted with a Kolkata class destroyer, which is the Navy's largest principal surface combatant, could you tell us a bit about of your ship? I mean, how big it is really and how powerful it is as a destroyer?
uh, like you said, these are the biggest combatants that the Indian Navy operates. This is about 8,000 tons in displacement, which is about 165 meters in length. And we have a crew generally of about 250 plus people and 40 plus officers. It's armed with the latest of weapons and sensors, the latest technology that you can think of. It's all fitted on these ships. It gives us that combat power that the Navy wields in times of necessity. Uh, in these conditions, ship less than ours usually get tossed around. Even 7,500 tons isn't really that much when you consider you're pitching it against a cyclone. But this is still significant displacement. Notwithstanding, the cyclone was so powerful that it kept us rolling about 30 or 40 degrees either side. Uh, the forecastle called part of the ship was going into the water and coming out. So we had the stern coming up at one end, the forecastle going in another end. So this sort of motion, uh, port to starboard, left to right, if you call it, forward and back, in which you have to stand on the ship. At that point, it becomes difficult for those who are young, just joined, not very experienced. But at some point, it became difficult for almost anybody to stand up straight. Uh, but we had to manage that. Uh, we had to sort of negotiate the sea, uh, take a course that didn't beat us back that much. The tides were really strong because of the cyclone. We were, in fact, not making good the speed we intended to make good. It was setting us back about 30%. That was the effect of the set at that point.
So in your
Moving
career
forward,
of over 20 years, Captain Sequeira, have you seen anything like this? Have you seen a weather condition as bad as this one?
thankfully, no, I have not been through cyclones. You see, the natural precedent for most mariners, whether they are warships or they're commercial ships, is to avoid cyclones. Over the
Right.
years, cyclone prediction has become very accurate. So by and large, with the warnings you get, most mariners stay well clear of cyclones. For us, of course, this was a different dimension. This was a mission where we had to go into cyclones. And so for me and for most of my crew, this is probably the first time that we went into a cyclone and this close to the eye of the storm. There have been incidents in the past, but most ships have sort of always aimed to steer out, clear of the cyclone, protect themselves, including warships.
And here you were
This was
heading into the cyclone.
That's correct. Here, our directives were to go into the cyclone as close as possible to the eye. Essentially, this the vessel in distress, this barge was unfortunately not in command and was just being tossed around and in a bad state, I believe, at that point.
And could you describe what you saw there? Did you get distress signals from the shipwreck survivors, from the barges that had sunk?
So yes, as we moved out, like I said, we got into the sea, and by about 2 o'clock that day, we had managed to communicate. We got a message relayed through one of their rigs that they were trying to communicate. We had established communication by about 2 o'clock or so that afternoon. We were still about 15 miles from him and trying to make good to reach him at the earliest. But like I said, because of the sea conditions, it wasn't possible to approach him directly. When we turned towards him, we had the worst sort of aspect of the storm. We had to take beam seas and winds, which kept keeping her on that course very difficult. So we did a sort of evasive course, port and starboard, to finally raise him at about 3:30. Uh, that's when we sighted him. They sighted us. We could make out that our presence was reassuring to them. Which I'm sure it was reassuring to us as well. It was rather difficult sight for us also to see that the barge had already seemed to have taken in water.
This is
Their bows were,
Papa 305.
that's correct, 305. Her bows were in. She was awash. There was a message that their crew were already, passengers were already mustered, kept ready on upper deck. But unfortunately, with the sea state being what it was and still waves breaking all over the place and winds that high, we couldn't have approached the barge in that condition. That would probably have been too risky a decision, far worse, because that would have damaged both him and me. Uh, and of course, in that sea state, you really can't lower boats, so you can't put men in water. We understand from their conversation that they had attempted that a little earlier that morning and their life rafts had all gone down. Uh, that really wasn't much of an option to us at that point. So they were asked to just hold on for a bit and we were hoping that the storm would abate. But by around 5:30 or so, we realized that it really wasn't much progress on that front. and we could make out that things were getting worse. So we closed him again and lowered our life rafts. That is the life rafts we carry on our ship. So we managed to lower about 14 of our life rafts from
Yeah,
our
right.
decks in close proximity, hoping that in case the worst happened, people in water could have gotten to our life rafts, and then we would have picked them up from there. Being rubber, they have a uh, flexibility, so they maintain in water. They don't get, of course, they get tossed around. It's violent, but it's better than having a rigid hull which goes down.
Right. So you
Uh,
were, in a sense, you were improvising all this while you were there on the
on
scene
the
of the
fly, yeah,
cyclone.
yeah.
On the
Uh,
fly. There was nothing, no training kind of prepared you for this kind of thing. As in, like, no one trains for a cyclone, but so in a sense
no
that,
one trains for the cycle exactly. Your training for a cyclone is essentially to get out of it in the normal course.
right,
Uh, but here we were improvising, but based on our basic training. See, our sailors and men are generally taught seamanship basics. Those values of seamanship never change. What you learn, the simple facts of seamanship are the most important, and they never go wrong. So you have to use those concepts, use that fallback knowledge to improvise as you go ahead. So while we had options, we were looking at our nets, we were looking at ropes and life buoys and life rafts and things like that. We were doing it one at a time. So we first option was to throw some life rafts in, throw the life buoys. Should the worst happen, some of them would grab onto a life raft or life buoy or something. Uh, Fortunately, within about half an hour, we got a message that the crew and the passengers were abandoning and they were jumping overboard. I believe that they were briefed on their side, which I'm told later, to sort of form in groups, put their life jackets on, tie some ropes. A larger group is easy to spot at sea. And thankfully, they did that. So as soon as we got that message, I think about 1800 or so, 6 p.m., we again moved in. We were maintaining close by all this time, but the visibility being what it was, you really couldn't see even at a mile, which is sort of 5 cables. It's about 1,000 yards or 2,000 yards. So we closed in further. And as we moved in further, we could see these men in water. And by then, we had decided that the only option left now was to try and go close to them, move the ship in, lower our scramble nets, and position such that we catch them and pick them up from the water. There was no other way to do it at that point. Like I said, boats lowering was out of question. Putting our own life rafts is uncontrollable. You put them,
and
but you
what are
can't
the waves
control them.
like? I mean, I'm told the waves are like 5 meter, 4, 5 meters high, as high as,
It was still bad. It was still
right,
bad. The storm really hadn't abated, and
yeah,
while we were monitoring reports of the movement, it at that point didn't seem to have moved at all. Uh, Against my hopes that it would have moved faster and got out and made it easier for us, it was still quite bad. We were still about, if I'm not mistaken, 35, 40, 40 miles from the eye of the storm. So it was just there. But like I said, there was no time left. We had to just get in and do whatever was possible. So my team decided let's go with our scramble nets. Let's try and close as best as we can. That's the best shot we had. Get them onto somewhere near the ship, and if we could keep the ship steady somewhere close to them, we'll try and grab them with the life buoys, some lines, and then pull them to the nets. So
right. And
essentially, that's what we did.
scramble nets are the nets that you put along the sides of your ship, which allow
Correct.
people to
These
climb up.
these are big, huge nets which you generally tie on board, and when required, you unfurl them and you lower it so it goes down to the water. The upper
Right,
end remains connected to the ship. So if there's somebody in water, the idea is if he can get close to a net and he's fit enough, he can climb on it simply
right,
with a little bit of help from the deck. So we have these ships such as mine are fitted with a fair number. We have four nets, two on either side. So as we decided we'd do this, we load our nets. We got all our teams mustered. We divided our men. Uh, in fact, I had more than the people I required coming up, join and be part of these teams. Of course, that enthusiasm had to be curbed. We needed people to stand and do their job carefully and seriously. They got into it. Of course, like you earlier mentioned, we are really not very sure if this is going to work, but we had decided this was our best shot. So as we approached the survivors, then we had these life buoys and lines thrown over. We realized they were managing to catch it, and with that, we dragged them closer to the nets. And once they were close to the nets, then it was just a question of them pulling them up.
right. And
Handling the
all
ship
your
was
ship's
first.
company were, at action stations, they were all trying to
The
rescue.
entire team was up and about
Right,
uh, because we were maneuvering. The ship is moved. We're constantly handling the ship, far ahead and astern to keep her in station, get her in the correct position. So people had to do their jobs, and everybody was not doing his job at that point, was out on deck helping with one team or another.
right,
Everybody who was not contributing to the machinery propulsion of the steering was out in this pulling people out effort. So somebody was throwing life buoys, somebody was throwing lifeline, somebody down at the nets. There were people then holding these guys who we recovered and then taking them to a medical station. Then we had people looking after them as they arrived, the doctor, his medics, administering aid, looking after them, somebody handling their clothes, their food, stuff like that. So everybody was
right.
on
So,
this.
what's the condition of the survivors? I mean, given the fact that they had been tossed around in a storm, I mean, were they, mentally and physically, they must have been exhausted.
Most of them, I would think, were to a certain extent in shock. Uh, Many of them obviously had fair relief on their faces once they came on board. Uh, Initially, as we were doing our recovery, which started about 6:30 on the 17th, we saw them able to climb up the nets. Uh, this progressed through the night. Uh, we had recovered about 40 odd people by the time it was 9 at night. It was still raining. It was still, we were being tossed around. We got an input from another shipping company. There was another merchant vessel there at about 10:30, 11. Tell us